Well, good Thursday morning, everybody. It is February 18th, and in case you are unaware, tonight is the Soup Supper. It's a drive-through or a delivery only. So if you're wanting it's a chili and a cinnamon roll. Donna Westcott cinnamon rolls, famous cinnamon rolls. So if you're wanting one of those, call the church office this morning if you want it delivered. If you were wanting to just pick it up, come on up between 5 and 7. Okay? All right. So it is a bit warmer today. We seem to be getting on our way out of this, or to be on our way out of this severe cold snap. So by next week, it's going to be close to 40. They're kind of hedging their bets on that, saying 38, 39 for the high. So that'll be amazing. But at any rate, we are continuing our way through the 23rd chapter of Luke's Gospel. And if you remember yesterday, we got done with dealing with the whole thing before Pilate and the release of Barabbas in the place of Jesus. The crowd requested for Barabbas rather than Christ. So today we are picking up. It's the beginning of Jesus is on his way to the crucifixion. We don't get to the crucifixion today, but we're on the way. It's going along the way of the Via Dolorosa, which is the path of the cross that is in Jerusalem. When you're in Israel, you walk through the streets of Israel, of Jerusalem rather, and there are signs along the way marking the various stations of the cross. This is the path they believe that he took. There's not 100% confidence. We'll talk about that later as we go through this stuff about the place of the skull and all of that, where the crucifixion actually happened and where the tomb is as well. So with that, we're going to look at chapter 23, Luke's Gospel. Today we're going to look at verses 26 to 31. So let's dive into that and talk about that a little bit. As they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country. And they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" Okay, Simon of Cyrene. This is an interesting figure. He's in all of the synoptics, all three of the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And in Mark's gospel, they identify him as being the father of Alexander and Rufus. Okay, Rufus is sometimes thought to be, we don't know for sure, but it's often believed that Rufus is the person mentioned by Paul in Romans, and I believe it's chapter 16 of Romans. He mentions Rufus, and there was church legend that Rufus grew up and became a bishop in the early church. So he was a church leader in the early church, and that's a common belief, or was a common belief in the early church. Here we have him. It's interesting here. We always envision the paintings of Simon in there with his shoulder under the cross beside Jesus, but it's saying here he's following Jesus, isn't it? So that's something that's perhaps a little different in the way we depict that or think of it. But I think the idea of having him with his shoulder under the cross beside Christ is that he's coming alongside Christ. So there's a little more of and plus it's from a standpoint of structuring the composition of a piece of artwork, it's a little easier to have the composition with Jesus right there beside it. It's a little more dynamic, a little more meaningful sometimes. But any rate, so he's walking along, helping Jesus. That wasn't uncommon. If the soldiers would make the criminals, or the convicted, we shouldn't say criminals here, that sounds harsh, the convicted, to carry their own cross. If they were too weak, they would grab somebody out of the crowd to force them into helping out, rather than the soldiers themselves carrying the cross. So at any rate, Simon is on the way to the cross with Jesus carrying the cross, or on the way to the crucifixion with Jesus carrying the cross, and Jesus is talking to the women as we go along. Now that's interesting, because remember yesterday the crowd was crying for crucify him, all of that, and now we've got the crowd wailing and lamenting for him. So that seems like a strange thing. Well, obviously, crowds are not homogenous, are they? Look at things that are going on in this world. We have differences of opinions. We have people that are for and against. So don't think of the crowd as being one big, massive pro this or pro that, or anti this or anti that. So you've got people on both sides of this issue. And so the women are lamenting for him. He turns to them and talks to them, daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. This is a prophecy. Jesus is prophesying. He is foretelling what's going to come in AD 70 when Jerusalem is razed and the Jews are driven out and many of them are killed. And it was a very, very harsh and awful, terrible time. And this is what he's getting at, especially if they were in Masada up on the mountain and all the men ended up killing their children and their wives and then killing themselves before the Romans came up and took them. So blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore and the breasts that never nursed. They won't know. They won't have to see their children killed, is what it's getting at there. And then they begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. And I think that's a reference to Masada. The hill is covering us and hiding us. And the final one is the one that's really the foreboding one. Because remember Barabbas, we talked about Barabbas yesterday, man of violence. He was an insurrectionist, very likely a zealot, and the zealots were involved in the whole thing of the recapturing of Jerusalem in 66, and then of course the fall of it in 70 when the Romans came back with more men. He's saying, for if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry? The zealots were hot-headed, and it was like there was a metaphor about flames and burning with the zealots. And Jesus' way is he's comparing his way with that of greenwood. Greenwood is not super combustible, is it? You have to really work at trying to get things to burn that are green. Yesterday, because it was Ash Wednesday, and because last year we had Ash Wednesday last year, and we used up the palms from the previous year, and we didn't have Palm Sunday. We were in a position, I think a lot of churches were, we didn't have palms. So I had to get some palms from Patrick, and Patrick graciously gave us some palms he trimmed off of a palm that he had down at the shop. But guess what? It is completely green. There was no way to burn that. I had to dry them first before I could burn them, because they weren't going to burn, are they, when they're super succulent? And that's the point there. The wood is green. Jesus' way is not a combustible way. Jesus' way is the way of peace. He's trying to do it to accomplish the end through love. And if they're going to come down this harsh on him, if they're going to crucify him in this manner and so harshly, what are they going to do when the wood is dry, when they come in violence? And that is really, I think, what's going on here. That's the meaning of this exchange that he has here. Violence is often overrated. There would be arguments. There are times when violence is necessary in the world, and perhaps there are some arguments for that. But generally speaking, almost always the way is the path of love. And we need to remember that. We need to remember that when we're dealing with each other. We need to remember that when we're dealing with everyone. We need to remember that when we're dealing with Scripture, that the overarching message is the message of love. So with that, I'm going to leave you. We've worked our way through the Via Dolorosa. Remember, on the way to the place of the skull, Calvary. And so we're on our way there. And we'll talk about that all tomorrow. Okay? Have a very blessed day, and please, please, please be a blessing to someone today. We will see you in the morning, or maybe I'll see you tonight if you come up to get soup. Don't forget, tonight, soup supper, 5 to 7. If you want it delivered, call Clint now, 464-3290. All right? Talk to you later. God bless. Bye-bye.